Hi, good day everyone. Welcome to This Thing As Well TV Super News. Please follow me on Instagram and Twitter as well at This Thing As Well TV Super News. Please subscribe to this my YouTube channel now. Thanks.
Much of this stuff is either celebratory, he did something, or he didn't do something, or just a sort of standard issue propaganda that your average internet troll might produce on a daily basis. But just because most of the stuff Trump tweets is just quickly forgotten fodder for those who love and hate him, doesn't mean you can ignore it. Why? Well, because Trump's Twitter feed is a direct link into how he thinks, what he cares about, who he really is. And every once in a while, the president unwittingly reveals something really important about himself in a tweet. Now, just that happened in early September with this tweet from Trump. Quote, "The Dow Jones Industrial just closed above 29,000. You are so lucky to have me as your president. With Joe Biden, it would crash." "You are so lucky to have me as your president" is on its face a remarkable thing for a president to say. In fact, it's inconceivable that any past president would say that. Past presidents, whether Democrat, Republican, Whig, or Federalist, I see you, John Adams, have understood that serving as president is both an honor and a public trust. That to be trusted by 330 million Americans with representing their interests both domestically and internationally is a massive gift that should humble anyone who ascends to the office. It is, without question, the highlight and honor of anyone's life who gets to serve in that role. Trump, as his tweet makes clear, doesn't really see things that way. In his mind, he's doing the country a giant favor in serving as president. He sees the presidency as sort of an inconvenience, one he is only willing to take on because he believes only he can fix what ails the country. And that's not my opinion about how Trump views the presidency. He's said that very thing lots of times. Quote, "I love my previous life. I had so many things going," Trump told Reuters in the 27 interview, adding, "This is more work than in my previous life. I thought it would be easier," end quote.
This thing is costing me a fortune being president. It's probably costing me from $3 to $5 billion for the privilege of being, and I couldn't care less. I don't care. You know, if you're wealthy, it doesn't matter. I just want to do a great job.
In an interview with Barstool Sports earlier this summer, Trump was somehow even more blunt.
The best day in my life in terms of business and life and everything was the day before I announced I'm running for president. Everything was good. The company was good. I had finished up a lot of jobs that were very successful. And then I said, I want to do this. Now, I'm really glad I did, but I was treated very unfairly.
The whole "you kind of owe me" idea was also present at the concluded Republican National Convention back in August.
All of this changed dramatically in 2015 when a billionaire named Donald Trump put his own life of luxury on the line.
Said Charlie Kirk, the president of a young conservatives group, in the very first speech of the convention. And Trump himself, in the very last speech of the convention, nodded to all that he had given up when he said this, quote, "From the moment I left my former life behind, and a good life it was, I've done nothing but fight for you," end quote. See, for Trump, being president is an imposition. It took him away from his great life of just being rich and famous. And in his mind, being very well liked. Quote, "I had a very high approval rating. It was close to who's 100%, but it was pretty close," he told Barstool Sports. Sidebar, this is totally inaccurate. Trump has never had an approval rating higher than 50%, ever, in public or private life, end sidebar. Now, being president hasn't been as fun as Trump had hoped. And it's been, well, hard. Way harder than being a billionaire reality TV star. And so Trump wants to be thanked for taking on this burden. The burden of being president. Yes, seriously. Which makes sense because he wants to be thanked for pretty much everything in his life. In mid-March, as the coronavirus pandemic that has now killed almost 200,000 Americans was ramping up in the United States, Trump was suggesting that he be praised for his handling of it.
We've done a fantastic job. The only thing we haven't done well is to get good press. We've done a fantastic job, but it hasn't been appreciated. Even the closing down of the borders, which had never been done, and not only did we close them, but we closed them early. The press doesn't like writing about it.
The following month, when asked about his response to the coronavirus by reporters, Trump said this, quote, "I believe there were no deaths when I closed up the country, and you should say thank you very much," end quote. Back in 2018, then Trump 2020 campaign manager Brad Parscale, he's since been demoted from that role, appeared in an ad urging viewers to make sure the president was aware of their gratitude to him. Quote, President Trump has achieved more during his time in office than any president in history, said Parscale in the ad, adding, we need to let President Trump know that we appreciate what he's doing for America. I need you to call the number on your screen and deliver a thank you to President Trump. End quote. And as recently as last month, Trump tweeted this, quote, Rhino Ben Sass, who needed my support and endorsement in order to get the Republican nomination for Senate from the great state of Nebraska, has, now that he's got it, thank you, President T, gone rogue again. This foolishness plays right into the hands of the radical left Dems. End quote. Thank you, President T. You get the idea. This is a man who wants to be thanked for literally everything. Chris Traeger shadow. He has zero sense that the presidency is not about him, but rather about the country. He views himself as a great man who has stooped to be president and expects everyone around him to constantly acknowledge the massive sacrifices that he is making. Now that view is a radical departure from the way in which the presidency.
India has now become the second country in the world to cross the grim milestone of 5 million cases. Some residents fear that relaxing restrictions have led people to be less vigilant.
It is scary to go out because, you never know. It's invisible, it could be anywhere.
Now is the time when we should have this proper lockdown. This is the time when we should have proper lockdown, not that time when we had it. This is the time, so we should take proper measure.
Back in March, India imposed one of the world's strictest and largest lockdowns, ordering 1.3 billion people to stay home. But 6 months later, the coronavirus is spreading faster than ever.
The more disturbing thing is the last million has been added in last 11 days only. And before that, 1 million was added in 13 days. So that is more disturbing.
For now, authorities are ruling out imposing another nationwide lockdown in the world's second most populous country, noting that cases and deaths per capita are much lower than other global hotspots. According to the World Health Organization, India has around 3,600 infections per 1 million residents. Per capita, that's 5 times less than in the U.S. India also has relatively low deaths per capita, 59 per 1 million residents, compared to roughly 580 in the U.S. While the U.S. remains the country with the highest total number of cases, 6.5 million, some experts predict India may soon surpass that, warning that its deaths are likely.
COVID crisis across the northeast. And our evidence from contact tracing tells us it's happening broadly in 3 main areas. That's in bars and pubs, in people's homes, and in grassroots sports. And so what we've done is try to get ahead of the curve and ask government for some additional temporary restrictions so that we can get on top of the virus in all of those areas. That means restrictions on table service only in bars and pubs, as well as a 10 p.m. Closure of all bars and pubs across our region and cafes, delivery service for takeaways only after 10 p.m, and restrictions on households meeting up with each other outside of social bubbles. We're hoping the government will give us an exemption on informal childcare arrangements for extended family members because we know how important that is. But we're asking people not to mix outside of their own household unless they're in a social bubble. And also some restrictions on major events too. I appreciate that these are not easy measures, and people have worked so hard to get businesses up and running again after the national lockdown. There might be some fear about the impact of these, but we are working with businesses, and we want to ensure that all of our businesses who work very hard to ensure they're COVID secure and COVID safe continue to operate through this with some additional measures just to curb the spread of the virus where we know the spread is happening most prevalent.
Yeah, so just to clarify, these are the same pubs and restaurants that we were given financial incentives to go to last month. We're now being told that we shouldn't go to them or need to leave early.
No, people are still very welcome to go to bars and restaurants. The only change will be that it will be table service only. That's to ensure social distancing in all places. One of the challenges that we've got is that we have a number of pubs where people have been congregating around the bars, standing, and clearly it's very difficult to maintain social distancing when that's going on. So table service only, and a 10 p.m. finish closure for all pubs and restaurants. That's to ensure that people can still get home safely and aren't out, because one of the challenges has been groups of people meeting up in our towns and city centres very late at night. And again, after a few drinks, that means social distancing goes out the window. So we want to ensure that that isn't another opportunity for the virus to keep spreading.
But wasn't it table service only anyway?
No, the restrictions the restrictions around that were lifted, which is why we're asking for them to be reimposed. And the other change is that we're asking people not to go to bars and restaurants outside of their social bubbles or outside of their households. That means that you shouldn't aim to meet up with people in the pub that you couldn't meet up with in your home. So I appreciate that that's, again, a restriction on people, but we think it's a necessary restriction as a preventative measure now to head off a much more damaging full lockdown, which would be the inevitable consequence if we didn't act at this stage.
So you go to the pub on your own and you're Billy No Mates, and if your neighbour's there, you need to go home. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that none of us want to be in this situation. We all know that this is challenging, but actually, if people say that this is about loss of liberty, there is no greater loss of liberty than the loss of life. We've seen the numbers of COVID cases go up exponentially. We've seen it start to spread from younger people into older generations. It's going up at more or less the same rate as it was going up at the start of the original first wave. And we know that that led to thousands and thousands of deaths. And that's ultimately what we're trying to prevent. As some additional preventative measures now will head off further real challenges down the line. And that's what I'm hoping the government will confirm later today.
But, Councillor, if that is the case, why don't you just go for a whole lockdown in the North East? So the pubs are not open, the restaurants are not open, and then we don't see that figure spiking.
Because so many of our businesses in the hospitality sector have worked so hard to be COVID secure, and the vast majority of them have done an absolutely fantastic job. And it would be, I think it would penalise them if they were forced to close just when they've got back on their feet again. We think a 10 p.m. closure, which frankly is only an hour before they would normally close for most of them, is an appropriate compromise and a way of keeping them open and keeping them in business, as well as ensuring that everybody understands and gets the messages around the real importance of social distancing, which, frankly, after a few drinks tends to go out the window.
But that's the point, isn't it? Alcohol and social distancing don't mix, do they? So while we're seeing this spike again, particularly in your areas, why not go for the whole lockdown?
That's why we're asking for table service only, because it's much easier to maintain social distancing if people are seated with table service, because you can literally see where everybody is and there's much less chance of coming into contact with people if, unlike if you were actually mingling at the bar. We've taken public health advice. We've worked with the hospitality industry on this, and we're convinced that this is a safe way of ensuring those businesses can continue to operate, but with some additional restrictions just to make sure that social distancing is effectively maintained for everybody in those premises.
Thanks for watching this is Aswa TV. Super, please subscribe. Choose.